My beloved child, in the stillness before dawn, when the world lay silent and heavy upon his chest, he wandered through the shadows of his own weary soul. The weight of unseen burdens bent his spirit, yet within him stirred a quiet dignity, as if he were meant for something greater than this darkness. Then, from the depths of the silence, a voice gentle, unshaken, whispered, "I am still here." He paused, breath caught between doubt and wonder. Was it a memory, a dream, or something far beyond the grasp of reason? In that fragile moment, the unseen brushed against his life, and nothing would ever feel the same again. How is your child's health today? Please share in the comments so we can all pray for each other. The voice did not return as thunder nor vision, but as a quiet promise woven into the ordinary hours of his day. It spoke of provision, of unseen hands guiding his path, of blessings yet to unfold like seeds beneath the soil. Though no sign marked its origin, its tone carried a strange authority, gentle, yet impossible to ignore. He felt it not only in his thoughts, but deep within his spirit, where truth and longing often meet. Yet, as the promise settled, another presence stirred, subtle, sharp, and persistent. It did not shout, it whispered. "It is nothing," it said, "a trick of a tired mind, a comfort you invented to survive the weight of your own struggle." This was the voice of doubt, cloaked in reason, steady in its logic, and dangerously convincing. It reminded him of every unanswered prayer, every delay, every moment he had hoped and been disappointed. Thus began a quiet war within him. One voice called him forward into faith, asking him to trust what could not yet be seen. The other anchored him to what was familiar: fear, caution, and the safety of disbelief. He stood between them, neither fully yielding nor fully resisting, as if his soul had become a crossroads between heaven and silence. Still, there was something about the promise that refused to fade. It did not force him, nor did it argue. It simply remained patient, enduring, waiting for him to choose whether to believe that what felt impossible might, in time, become real. The days that followed did not unfold with the gentleness he had hoped for. Instead, they hardened, as though the world itself had turned against him. What little certainty he once held began to fracture. Doors that seemed ready to open quietly closed, and the ground beneath his plans gave way without warning. A single moment, brief, ordinary in appearance, shifted everything. The work he had depended on vanished, not with noise, but with a cold finality that left no room for appeal. At home, words once spoken in care grew sharp, tangled in misunderstanding, until silence replaced what used to be warmth. He stood in the aftermath, not broken but deeply shaken. It was not merely the loss that unsettled him, but the stillness that followed. The voice that once whispered promise seemed distant now, almost unreachable, as if it belonged to another time. In its place, a heavier thought settled in. Perhaps he had been alone all along. Yet even in this unraveling, there remained something unyielding within him. A quiet, almost hidden strength refused to fully surrender. He questioned, yes, but not with bitterness. There was a depth in his struggle, a solemn dignity, as though his soul understood that this trial was not random, but permitted. Still, the tension grew. Faith no longer felt like light, it felt like weight. Each step forward demanded more than he believed he had to give. And in the silence where answers did not come, he faced the most difficult question of all. If the promise was true, why did the darkness deepen? Night did not fall as it once had. It arrived with a strange stillness, as though the air itself were waiting. Exhausted by the weight of unanswered questions, he drifted into sleep, yet what came to him was not rest, but a vision that felt more real than waking. He stood in a place he did not recognize, where light moved without source and silence carried meaning. Before him appeared a doorway, not built by hands, but formed of something living, shimmering, almost breathing, as if it existed between worlds. He did not step forward, yet he felt drawn. And then, without sound, another presence stood beside him. It did not startle him. Rather, it felt familiar in a way he could not explain, like a memory long buried or a truth he had always known but never named. The figure did not reveal its face clearly, nor did it speak in ordinary words. Still, understanding passed between them, quiet and certain. This was the guide, though he could not tell if it was sent from beyond or born from the depths of his own spirit. It neither commanded nor persuaded. It simply pointed, not toward the door itself, but toward something within him, something he had almost forgotten. In that moment, the confusion that had clouded his mind did not vanish, but it shifted, as though a hidden pattern had begun to emerge beneath the chaos. When he awoke, the world appeared unchanged, yet nothing felt the same. The memory of that light lingered not as proof, but as a question that refused to fade, and deep within him, where doubt and faith continued their silent struggle, a new awareness began to rise. Perhaps what he had encountered was not meant to be understood, but to be followed. The days grew heavier, not with outward chaos, but with an inward division that would not quiet. It was as though his soul had become a chamber where two voices stood in opposition, each claiming authority over his path. One spoke with calm persistence, reminding him of the promise, of the light he had glimpsed, of the presence that felt both ancient and near. It did not demand belief, it invited it, asking him to trust what had not yet taken form. The other voice rose with sharper clarity, grounded in reason and memory. It recounted every disappointment, every unanswered plea, every moment where hope had led only to silence. Return, it urged. Return to what you understand. Walk the path that requires no faith, no risk, no unseen hand. It offered certainty, though it was empty of wonder. He stood between them, not as one confused, but as one aware of the weight of choice. There was something noble in his hesitation, not weakness, but the gravity of knowing that either path would shape the very core of who he would become. To believe was to step into uncertainty, to surrender control to something greater than himself. To doubt was to remain guarded, untouched, but unchanged. The tension did not break him, it refined him. In that silent struggle, he began to see that faith was not the absence of doubt, but the decision to move forward despite it. And though no sign compelled him, no voice forced his hand, he felt the moment drawing near the point where he could no longer remain divided. He would either turn back to the familiar shadows, or step toward a truth he could not yet prove, but could no longer deny. The moment of decision did not arrive with thunder, but with hesitation. Faced with the unseen path, he faltered not in ignorance, but in caution. The weight of uncertainty pressed heavily upon him, and in that fragile space, he chose what felt safer. He stepped back from the edge of faith and returned, if only slightly, to what he could control. It was not a dramatic rejection, but a quiet withdrawal, a delay that seemed harmless in the moment. Yet the consequences unfolded with a quiet severity. Opportunities that had once lingered within reach dissolved without explanation, as though time itself had withdrawn its favor. Doors he had hesitated to enter no longer stood open. What he had postponed did not wait for him. In his personal world, the strain grew more visible. Words left unspoken became distant. Trust, once steady, began to fracture under the weight of misunderstanding. Those around him could not fully grasp the conflict within him, and in his silence, connections weakened. It was then that the voice of doubt returned not as a whisper, but with a steady and undeniable presence. "You see," it said, "this is what comes from chasing illusions." It spoke not with cruelty, but with a cold certainty that cut deeper than anger. It gathered evidence from his own life, presenting it with precision. The missed chance, the broken trust, the emptiness that followed hope deferred. He did not argue. There was a stillness in him now, not of peace, but of reckoning. For the first time, he felt the full weight of what it meant to stand divided. His earlier hesitation revealed itself not as neutrality, but as a choice in itself, a turning away from what had once called him forward. And yet, even in this descent, something within him refused to be extinguished. It was faint, nearly lost beneath the noise of failure and regret, but it remained. Not a voice, not a vision, only a quiet awareness that this collapse, though painful, was not without purpose. There was a depth forming within him, carved by loss, shaped by consequence. Still, the darkness deepened. Doubt grew stronger, no longer needing to persuade, only to remind. And as he stood in the ruins of what might have been, he faced a truth more difficult than any before. He had stepped away from the path, and now he did not know if it would ever open to him again. In that uncertainty, he reached the lowest point, not because all was lost, but because he could no longer rely on anything but the choice he had yet to make. The night of his deepest weariness did not arrive with noise, but with a silence so complete it seemed to press against his very being. He had reached a place where effort no longer felt meaningful, where even the act of hoping appeared distant and hollow. The world around him moved as it always had, yet he felt separated from it, as though standing behind an unseen veil. It was in this quiet desolation that something shifted, not outwardly, but within the unseen currents that shape a life. It began with something small, almost unworthy of notice. A passing word spoken by a stranger, simple, unremarkable, yet it struck him with a weight that could not be explained. It was not the meaning alone, but the timing, the precision, as if it had been placed deliberately in his path. He paused, not out of confusion but recognition. There was a pattern forming, subtle yet undeniable. Then came another sign. A memory surfaced, unbidden, carrying with it the same sense of quiet authority he had felt before. It was not imagination, nor was it fully tangible. It existed somewhere between knowing and seeing, where truth often reveals itself without form. And in that moment, the presence he had once encountered, the one he could neither name nor dismiss, returned. The guide was no longer distant. Though still veiled, it stood with a clarity that surpassed ordinary perception. It did not need to speak, for its presence alone carried understanding. What had once felt uncertain now bore a quiet certainty, not forced but undeniable. He sensed that this was no coincidence, no fragment of a restless mind. There was intention here, purpose, moving through the unseen. The voice of doubt did not vanish, but it faltered. For the first time, it lacked the strength it once held, as if confronted by something it could not fully explain away. And within him, something long buried began to rise, not confidence, but awareness. A realization that he was not abandoned, that even in his lowest moment, something had been watching, waiting, guiding with patience beyond his comprehension. He did not yet understand the full meaning of what was unfolding, but he no longer needed to. The question was no longer whether something existed beyond what he could see, it was whether he would continue to ignore what was now impossible to deny. And as he stood in that quiet turning point, he felt it clearly for the first time. The unseen was not distant, it had always been near. Morning came without announcement, yet it carried a quiet difference he could not ignore. The world appeared unchanged, streets, voices, familiar routines, but something within him had shifted with a depth that defied explanation. What once felt like a series of disconnected events now began to reveal a hidden order, as though unseen threads had been guiding each moment toward a purpose he had only just begun to perceive. He no longer dismissed the signs as coincidence. The words spoken at the precise hour, the encounter that arrived when he had nearly given up, the presence that returned without force yet with undeniable clarity, all of it now formed a pattern too deliberate to ignore. It was not that his questions had been fully answered, but rather that his way of seeing had changed. He no longer searched for certainty in what could be proven alone. He began to recognize truth in what resonated beyond reason. This awakening did not come as a sudden triumph, but as a steady reordering of his inner life. His thoughts, once scattered and heavy with doubt, grew quieter, more deliberate. He found himself pausing where he once reacted, listening where he once dismissed. There was a discipline emerging within him, not imposed, but chosen. The same world that had once drained him now became a place of quiet observation, where meaning could be found even in the smallest moments. His habits began to shift in subtle ways. He rose earlier, not out of obligation, but from a sense that the silence of dawn held something valuable. He withdrew from conversations that carried emptiness and sought those that stirred something deeper within him. Even in solitude, he no longer felt abandoned. There was a presence he could not fully name, yet it remained with him, steady and patient, as though guiding him without demand. The changes extended beyond himself. Relationships that once held him in patterns of confusion and quiet harm began to loosen their hold. It was not rejection, but clarity. He saw more clearly what nurtured his spirit and what diminished it. And with that awareness came a quiet strength, the courage to step away without bitterness and to remain where there was truth. He had not become someone entirely new, yet he was no longer who he had been. There was a nobility in his transformation, not loud or visible, but deeply rooted. The mystery had not been resolved, it had deepened. And within that mystery he found not fear, but direction. For the first time, he understood. This was not about escaping his life, but about awakening within it. The hour of decision came not with spectacle, but with a stillness so complete it seemed to suspend the very movement of time. He stood alone, yet not alone, for within him the final conflict had risen to its fullest strength. All that he had seen, all that he had endured, all that had quietly transformed him now converged into a single, irreversible moment. The voice of doubt returned, not as a whisper, but as a calm and measured presence more persuasive than ever before. It did not mock him, it reasoned with him. Consider this carefully, it said. What if you are wrong? What if all you have felt, all you have believed, is nothing more than a fragile illusion? You risk everything, your certainty, your stability, for something you cannot prove. Its words were not cruel, but they were precise, striking at the deepest part of his hesitation. He did not answer immediately. There was a silence within him, but it was no longer empty. It was full of memory, of quiet encounters, of moments that had carried a weight beyond explanation. He recalled the presence that had stood beside him without force, the words that had come at the exact moment they were needed, the subtle unfolding of change within his own heart. None of it could be measured, and yet none of it could be denied. Fear rose not as weakness, but as awareness of what stood at stake. To believe would mean surrendering control, stepping beyond the boundaries of reason into something unseen. To turn back would mean safety, a return to what could be explained, but also a quiet acceptance of emptiness. The voice pressed once more. If you choose wrongly, there will be no return. And in that moment, he understood something that had eluded him before. There was no path without risk. Even doubt demanded a kind of faith, a faith in absence, in limitation, in the belief that nothing greater could exist beyond what he could see. He lifted his gaze, not towards something visible, but towards something known within. There was no sign, no proof placed before him, only a quiet certainty that had grown through every trial, every fall, every moment of silence. And so, without evidence, without assurance, he chose. Not recklessly, but deliberately, he chose to believe. The tension did not vanish, but it transformed. Fear did not disappear, but it lost its authority. In its place came a stillness deep, grounded, unshaken. It was not the end of his journey, but it was the end of his division. For in choosing faith, he had stepped beyond the need to see, and into the truth he had long been prepared to receive. The change did not arrive as a sudden burst of wonder, but as a quiet unfolding like dawn, easing its light across a once dark horizon. The world around him had not been remade overnight, yet doors that once remained closed began, one by one, to open with gentle certainty. Opportunities appeared where there had been none, not in overwhelming abundance, but in precise and timely ways, as if guided by an unseen hand that neither hurried nor delayed. More striking than the outward changes was the stillness within him. The unrest that had once troubled his spirit gave way to a calm that did not depend on circumstance. It was a peace earned through struggle, anchored not in what he possessed, but in what he had come to understand. He no longer sought signs with urgency, nor did he question every silence. He had learned that what is true does not always reveal itself at once. It grows, it forms, it transforms. He now saw clearly. What he had once called a miracle was not a single moment, but a process, a shaping of the soul through trials, decisions, and unseen guidance. The promise had not been broken. It had been fulfilled in a way deeper than he had imagined. And so, he turned not only within himself, but outward toward those who walked paths like the one he had known. His voice carried neither force nor demand, only quiet conviction. If you find yourself in darkness, do not be quick to turn away. What you cannot yet see may already be at work within you. Hold steady, listen closely, and when the moment comes to choose, do not fear the unseen. If this path has stirred something within you, let it not remain with you alone. Share it. Let faith travel beyond your own steps, that others too may begin to see what was once hidden. At its core, this story reminds us that growth rarely begins in comfort. It often starts in confusion, doubt, and quiet struggle. Many people, especially in today's fast-paced world, expect clarity and results immediately. But real transformation is slower, deeper, and often invisible at first. The lesson is not to avoid doubt, but to face it honestly and still choose to move forward. Faith here does not only mean religion, it represents trust. Trust in your path, your effort, and the possibility that your life has meaning beyond what you currently see. Another key message is learning to let go of what holds you back, whether it's toxic relationships, limiting beliefs, or fear of failure. Change requires courage, and sometimes that courage is simply continuing when nothing seems to improve. For both young people chasing direction and adults carrying responsibility, the message is the same. Don't give up too early. Peace and success are not sudden miracles, they are built through daily decisions, patience, and inner alignment. If you stay consistent, open, and willing to grow, even the darkest season can quietly become the beginning of a better life. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please like and comment one if you find the story meaningful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more similar stories. See you in the next part.